give you some background on how we came up to today with the Match Nutrition brand. It's been quite a journey. It's taken actually many years and a cast of characters that have come, some have gone, but it really is something that every entrepreneur goes through. And since we've had entrepreneurs, want to join us here, I think you'll relate to some of the challenges and some of the things that we've had. Certainly, some of them are almost comical. Some are, of course, very serious, but it's a situation that's always very dynamic, very rolling forward, and a lot of fun. So the Match Nutrition story actually started quite a few years ago with an idea that I had while I was having a ultra marathon race. And really what it was I was not having a very good day. I had run this particular race in the spring before, but as people were passing me, I realized that it was something where everybody had probably eaten different amounts of food. They had trained differently. They probably had different brands of shoes, different amount of clothing. They had eaten and drank differently. All of us had running that races, and I was trying to struggle through the rest of the race, but it aha moment really was the fact that all of us, even though that we were out there doing the same activity, had probably taken a different path to get to that race day. So really, I started talking to a friend of mine, Peter Radigan, who is an ex-neighbor and actually moved out east with his family to teach at Rowan University. And Peter has a PhD in health sciences. He's a really bright and intelligent guy. Grew up in London, came to the States and married and had a family. I met Peter about 25 years ago. And really, he's not, but also a guy that has a real unique experience in how he trains and how he works it forward also. So I started presenting the problem that none of the products on the market out there really have any personalization to them. In other words, we all take the same, we all get the same ingredients, we all get the same nutrition out of them. How could we help consumers like myself become more personalized in our nutrition? So that was kind of the rough idea and the nucleus of what was then our first company name, which was Decade Sports. And so this whole idea of personalization started really on the hydration side from the standpoint of what we drink. And we were going to be a company that took on both Pepsi and Coca-Cola with a line of sports drinks. And they were going to be called Decade Sports. So we were going to have in the marketplace Gatorade, which is owned by PepsiCo, Powerade, which is owned by Coca-Cola, and then there was going to be us with Decade. What a great idea. So we had a lot of conference calls between the three of us. Peter had then added a gentleman named Greg Byron, who has a PhD in kinesiology and teaches with Peter out at Rowan University in New Jersey. We started having a series of just kind of general ideas about what could we do to come up with something that's personalized. And Greg piped up with the fact that men and women really need different nutrition, and the final step of nutrition and health and wellness is really to have something that was delineated by gender. And then I don't know if it was the amount of coffee that we had drank before this particular meeting, but also Greg brought up the fact that we could come up with a line of products that delineated by age our product selections also. And so we put together a line of products for a Decade that was going to be delineated by age and gender. What happened is when we went out and started talking to the investor community, we found out that one of our investors, one of our early investors he had come from ConAgra, a large multinational food company. And he just saw this taking on Pepsi and Coke as insanity. He said, first of all, they're bottling companies. So you're going to have probably them under contract bottle your product, or a beer company or someone that's in the bottling business because it's a unique process. Secondly, competing against two of the largest food companies on the planet was probably not a good idea. So he thought that this idea of separate nutrition would be better expressed through the nutrition bar business. And he said, it's much easier to get started in the nutrition bar business. I can help you by introducing you to some manufacturers that make nutrition bars, and they can take on new brands and so on and so forth. So just as we were getting ready to introduce the decade bars and nutrition bars, we found out that the intellectual property lawyer that we had hired had not actually checked the US Trademark and Patent Office to see if the decade name was available. So we found out that it was not. It was actually taken. So we had been into this approximately 1 year by now with the decade brand name and what we hope to be decade, and found out that it wasn't available. It was actually set aside, even though there was no products on the market by the owner of the person that had trademarked that name. So pivot number one, actually number two, we had to change from sports drinks idea with our concept into nutrition bars. And so we did that. We then went deep into the actual trademark area and patent office and started looking at a long list of names that we thought would be good. So it turns out that Version was available, and we changed the name of the company from Decade Sports to Version Sports and kept the sports theme. And this particular slide shows it pretty well. We had nutrition bars in the marketplace. Took us about 1.5 years, 2 years to get these bars made. And this particular line was actually well received by most consumers that you mentioned it to. We put up a website. We had hoped to be able to market some sales online with this particular line. And we started talking to distributors and retailers, specifically grocers and specialty brick and mortar retailers, hiking, biking, and running stores. So safe to say, this was particularly interesting because what we had done when we originally came up with the Version name was looked at a competitor called RX Bar. And I don't know if you've ever had or seen an RX bar on the grocery shelves, but what they had done was it was a couple of gentlemen from Chicago that had put together traditional nutrition bars, fairly healthy, fairly good tasting. And they had basically been in the marketplace for 3 or 4 years like we had. And they had basically run out of investment money, and they decided to redo their packaging with something that had the ultimate in simplicity. So an RX bar, when you looked at it on the package, said almonds, blueberries, 2 egg whites, no BS. So maybe you've seen that brand. And what it did was it immediately skyrocketed their business, took off substantially. And in about 3 years after that point in time from when they had changed their packaging, but not their bar, it spoke to the power of how to change marketing and packaging. They were able to sell that company to Kellogg's for $665 million. So we had always thought that we were going to skyrocket to fame also with these particular ideas if we could just get the name out there. So with Version, we decided to do some fairly radical packaging. This is the original packaging idea for Version bars, both for men and women. and we would put an actual human being, a man or a woman on it. We would put them in these, unusual V shapes. We had icons calling out the various nutrients, and we just thought that this was a brilliant idea. This was going to rock the industry, take our concept forward of individual nutritional values, and we would be able to take it forward. These were for 50-year-old men, and this happened to be the 30-year-old women. So as we took this idea forward, I had an acquaintance that works at General Mills. And so I decided to have coffee with him and bounce this idea off of him. And so you can imagine what happened. It turns out that nutrition bars are all shaped the same way because that's the way the machines make them. There's no ability to make a triangular bar without probably close to $1 million of tooling changes at the point of the manufacture to make a triangular bar. There would be a lot of waste, and it just turns out to be a crazy idea. But we felt we needed something demonstrable to steer people to the brand. So that was the Version Sports experience. We went to a traditional shape. We still put human beings on the bars themselves. These happen to be the women's line. And we took them and kind of arranged them in a vertical format like this, only to find out, of course, that once you packaged them and put them on a grocer's shelf, they might end up upside down. They were definitely not going to be displayed, even in your carton, in this fashion, because again, you would have had extra effort at the point of manufacture to arrange them in the box that way. So that was pivot number 2, 3, 4, 5 at this particular point in time. I'm starting to lose count. We were able to get some sales off that line directly off our website, and then also in some of our hiking, biking, and running stores talked to. And it also came up with the idea that you had to have 20 bars in the product line. So you have 5 age groups. You have the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then you have that for women, and you have it for men. And then you need at least 2 flavors of a product to get on the shelves. So we were going to grocers and saying, give us 20 bars for business. And it's going to take a lot of shelf space. And that shelf space is very expensive, quite frankly, when you're going in as a new brand. So we had 20 SKUs in the line. When you have a manufacturer that's doing a lot of business with large manufacturers like Cliff Bar and RX Bar and Kind Bar and so on and so forth, your minimum order to get your bars made to your specs is usually 25 to 50,000 bars. So the long and short of it is it gets complicated in a hurry. So we took the Version Sports line and realized that we had gone too far from a standpoint of the burdens that would be on us to make bars and to keep them in stock. And also the burden was a big ask for anybody that wanted to put the product line in. So you can take and use this as just general learning in the life of an entrepreneur, because some of these things were very subtle and crept up on you, and some of them should have been obvious from the start. So that was our learning curve on the Version Sports line. And one of the things we had done in the gestation period of looking at manufacturing bars, there's always cross currents coming through the food business, like there is any business. The cross currents that were coming through were non-GMO capability, gluten-free manufacturing. And of course, the big thing in the food business is trying to figure out what is a fad that could fade very quickly, and what is a trend that's probably going to be around in 5 to 10 years. So as you look at that, I had come from a totally different industry and started to look at what was a fad versus what's a trend. And, a typical fad business is usually something that can come out of the diet industry. You don't have to go back too far to realize and look at diets that come through the world and get promoted heavily to realize that they have a life cycle of about 24 to 36 months. That if you were, doing the Atkins diet, or you're doing any of the keto diets, paleo, 0 calorie, no calories, no sugar, no cholesterol, all of these things can help you lose weight, but they're highly suspect in the 24 to 36-month range. The reason I point that out about the diet industry is it's probably the best example of how something could be all the rage uh, and die in 24 to 36 months. So what we wanted to do was, look at what's going to be around and what's not going to be around. And we really think that we've threaded the needle with the current match bars because we backed up and just did gender delineation. And there's nothing in the marketplace like it. No one does anything specifically in nutrition bars that are readily available that has the gender delineation. The interesting thing is during our period of being version sports before we switched to match, the Cliff Bar Company put out the Luna Bar line, and it is specifically nutrition for women. And it's labeled that way. It sells very well. And it has been a part of the Cliff Bar sub-brands for over a decade. We always thought while we were doing version sports that we couldn't stop at just the gender delineation, because for sure they would certainly, with the success of the Luna Bar line, put out a bar that was nutrition for men. And for a wide variety of reasons, I think that they chose just to do other things with their money and their market share. And so they never put out a corresponding bar for men's nutrition. So that's where we are today, is we have match bars that are gender specific. We've learned a lot about what to embrace and thread the needle with the ingredients and things like that, and have really put together a bar that has very well understood vitamins and nutrients. You won't find anything that's unproven or not recommended by the RDA, the recommended daily allowance that we're all supposed to be, using in our diet. And so the vitamin mix is kind of our special sauce. It's 7 vitamins for men, 7 for women, and we vary the amounts based on what the recommendations are. And it is pretty well known that most women and men should have separate vitamins. And this has been practiced by the vitamin industry for quite a few years. And as you look at starting with a clean sheet of paper on a bar, there's a lot of decisions that you have to make. I'm no food scientist, but we have hired a gentleman named Sal Parco, and Sal does our bars, all of that. And he's worked for large food companies and very small independents like ourselves. And really what we wanted to do was have the best tasting bar that had all the legitimate sub-trends in the business and is very, very modern design. So if you look at our bar, we have vegetable protein. It's pea protein crisp. And on this particular slide, it's on the left there. We then mix those with whole blueberries, whole almonds, and the green leaf that you see just to the right of that is actually an agave leaf. And agave plants are not only the source of tequila, which some of you may like, but the agave plant also has a chemical component in it that is called an inulin. And that inulin is a prebiotic. And a prebiotic is a healthy substance that helps you with your consistent digestion, and it's a fiber source. So prebiotic, it also comes in a powder and a liquid, and it has a lot of great attributes to it. First of all, just to go behind the drape for a minute, the curtain, you have to have something that glues the bar together. And you can do it with sugar, you can do it with honey, you can do it with a wide variety of things, but you've got to have a liquid that glues it together. And basically, the inulin has all of those properties, and it's a very healthy thing for you. It's a fiber source. It is a sweetener. It has a mild to moderate sweet taste to it. And so that's what we use. The largest bar company in the business right now, Kind, uses chicory root fiber. And it also has some of the same attributes, which it has to glue the bar together. So that's where we're at with Match right now. We've carefully chosen the ingredients and worked with Sal on what we think is the best tasting bar. We put our specific vitamin mix into it. And also, since my two partners are professors, we like to think that there's a teaching or an educational aspect to this too. And we're trying to drive people, both women and men, towards what's going to help them long-term with their diet. It's well known that women need more folic acid, particularly in the years that they would choose to have a family and become pregnant. Folic acid is always one of the vitamins that you'll get in prenatal vitamins. Should you decide to have a family. Folic acid is very important to men. They just need less of it. Calcium, bone health, bone quality is very, very important because things like osteoporosis hit women disproportionately over the years. And bone health is really important throughout their life to stave off osteoporosis. So that's where the calcium. And iron. Women also need daily iron at a deeper level than men, even though men traditionally have a larger muscle mass and possibly a larger blood volume. So as we went forward, we immediately got a lot of enthusiasm from grocers on the line, because instead of walking in and saying you got to buy 20 bars, you could now buy 4. So we have 2 flavors of the bars in both men and women, blueberry almond, and we also have a dark chocolate almond. And so we're in the Lunds and Byerly stores. We're also in the Kowalski's, all locations for those 2 grocers. And then just as we were starting to get a foothold in the hiking, biking, and running stores, in the brick and mortar retailers, we really, ran into the wall of COVID pandemic. So a lot of the focus went off new brands and working with us. In this particular slide, it's one of our local running stores, Fleet Feet. Used to be Marathon Sports over at 50th and Penn, but we've taken and looked at really how can we help them be profitable in that business, because quite frankly, a nutrition bar for the smaller retailers has not been profitable for quite a few years, because they're piled up everywhere at the clubs and the various levels where you can buy them in bulk. So that's a particular slide when we put in dealer number 1 over at 50th and Penn. That's the crew at Fleet Feet, and they're our Match retailer number 1. And we really look at, how can we help the retailer make money? One of the things that's happened is when we changed brands from Version to Match, we decided to change graphic artists and brand artists. And so the Match brand has been driven pretty much forward by a gentleman named David Slack. And he's kind of an interesting guy in that his hobby is to make guitars. So he hand makes guitars. He's a craftsman in wood and steel, and is really an interesting guy. And there's a picture of David right there, and I'm holding one of his handmade guitars. David has a really interesting background in that he has worked for big brands before. And from the start, whether it was Decade or Version or Match, we've been trying to introduce something that is a premium brand. And there's in the hierarchy of brands, there's concierge brands, which are personal service brands. So you think of that as literally a concierge at a hotel or at a conference or something like that, concierge. There's also premium brands. And everybody knows what those are. Those could be Apple, they could be Nike, they could be Mercedes-Benz, they could be a wide variety of things. Those take, decades to establish. We wanted to be not a concierge or a premium brand. We wanted to be a specialty brand, which simply means you've got enough hooks that are legitimate, they're authentic, and that you could, relate to. And we think that personalized nutrition is something that everybody can relate to, because it doesn't matter whether you're in your 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You can take and look at how you've been able to feed yourself and fuel yourself over those years. You know what works, you know what doesn't work. So we wanted to be in that specialty brand business. And obviously below that, there's the mass market and commodity business. So mass market, I would think of things like Kind bars. Mass market would be most cookie brands, things like that. And then you've got commodities, which is your milk, bread, and eggs, things like that, where people don't attach any particular, assets to it except for price. Commodity brand is just that. What can I buy and how cheap can I buy it? I need this, but that's the way we do it. So these 5 tiers of ideas about brands, I really wanted to be in the center in the specialty brand. And the delineated nutrition, I think we've hit that balance. I'm particularly proud of the product we're offering on the market right now. There's been a lot of twists and turns. Our website at My Match Bar is where you can buy our bars, and you can get a 25% discount by putting in Match 25, and you'll get that discount right off the bars. Amazon, we just had a soft launch about 3 weeks ago on, so our bars are at amazon.com/matchbar. And that works pretty well because,
Mark, can I interrupt you for a second? Because we've got questions starting to pile
Sure.
up here. Can I send you some in from, some of them are from the people that are here. The first one's from Karen, which is quite a journey. How did you stay motivated to continue the quest?
Well, I'll tell you, the motivation is really my passion. I have 2 passions, and that is to invent a specialty brand and sell it for a fortune. Make no mistake. I want to ramp this up, sell it to General Mills or someone that I've got, some acquaintances at. Secondly, is my second passion is running and distance running. And really, I taught myself through running that there are no guardrails. There's no boundaries in what the human body will do if you simply set aside your baggage of what you learned as a child. Physically, we're all taught the rules of the game. Oh, you could never run this distance. Oh, this is a team sport. You've got to play this position. Here's the rules. Well, you can't invent a brand. And what keeps me going is this is an ultra marathon race right here, inventing a brand and putting in the assets that you want, and you'll never get to sell it unless you do it right. So this is not a 10K or a 5K or, a swim across the lake. This is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of money, and to get it right and push it forward. So that's a long answer, but.
That was a long answer, but
Yeah.
It was a good one. Here's the next one. We have 8 minutes left, Mark. This one actually came from our neighbor, Jeremiah. What is your single largest triumph in this 10-year journey?
The single largest triumph is really seeing someone when I'm in a store pick up a Match bar and carry it to the counter. And so, someone that you don't know exactly, was it simply something new they'd never seen before? Things of that nature. And the other thing was going into grocery when we did, and we've pulled back on grocery because quite frankly, we're trying to figure out how to make it profitable. We still don't know how to do that. Because it's very traditional business and very, old business, and you don't get to make a lot of the decisions when you go in. But one of the most satisfying things is we immediately ramped up to some national distributors in the grocery business. And they immediately saw the potential, and so did the grocery retailers. So that's encouraging from a standpoint of, obviously they understood that no one does this gender delineation, and it might be something that they want to be a part of.
Okay, here's our next one from Alice. How come you don't talk about the fact that you do not use the pink tax in your pricing? That you women's bars cost exactly the same cost of what you produce them, so you put them at a discounted rate versus making them same.
What we did is, there's some subtleties, and I can go down, a very long explanation. The women's bar actually costs us less because our vitamin mix between women and men, for reasons I'm not sure of from our vitamin manufacturer, the women's price of the vitamin mix is less, and it is substantially less. So we want to pass that on. We just want to be transparent in our pricing, and the women's bar is a little more inexpensive than the men's bar. And it is also something that it's a little smaller bar, incrementally, not a big deal, but we also wanted to keep the women's bar, just pass through those savings.
Okay, I have another one here. Did the peep, it says here, I see the amount of protein went up over the life of the Match Bar. Is that true?
I don't think so. The men's have slightly more protein simply because they're larger. So they have more of the pea protein crisps in them. They weigh a little bit more. They've got a few more calories in them. Both men's bar are over 200 calories. Both the women's bar, which are identical, by the way, except for the vitamin mix, are a little bit smaller. So that's the reason.
Package that you showed of the early Match Bar, not the early Match Bar, but a version bar, they were 9 grams of protein, and these are what, 12 or 13?
Yeah, we changed manufacturers. The formulation between the version bars and the Match bars, totally different. Completely.
10 grams. You're up to 10 grams in the women's,
Yeah.
which I just ate mine. So
Great testimonial there.
That's awesome.
This particular.
Okay, I have another question here from Aaron. Can you talk about the branch chain amino acids and why that's a big deal for men? And we have 4 minutes
Branch chain
remaining.
amino acids are important for both of the genders. However, branch chain amino acids come through, they ride with the protein. So all protein sources, doesn't matter if it's soy, hemp, whether it's pea protein or whatever, the branch chain amino acids come through the protein. So that's one of the reasons that we boosted the protein levels in the men. They're bigger. We wanted men to have more protein simply because they generally do have more muscle content, more blood volume, and they also often have slightly greater recovery needs after working out. Doesn't matter if it's lifting, going for a walk, something more strenuous. So the branch chain amino acids come through that, but they are a key component of a protein source.
Okay, and Jeremiah sent another question here about, can you talk about this for athletes specifically? We have 3 minutes remaining.
I mean, as an athlete, it doesn't matter if you're a biker, a walker, runner, doesn't matter if you play tennis. Generally speaking, a nutrition bar can be used in 2 ways. You're generally not going to use these as actual fuel during an event or during a workout. you are going to do it pre or post. And so what these really work out for is either. And the reason I point that out is because obviously any workout might give you the hungries, an hour and a half, 2 hours later. When you can't make it to lunch, you work out in the morning, and by 10:30 or 11, you're really hungry, and you've got a 1 p.m. lunch. So that's when a match bar really, comes in well. And post, you really, want to have something like that around and handy. If you're going to take it for a pre-workout, I would suggest probably 45 minutes to an hour before, because what you want to do is get the calories into your system. If you wake up and you're hungry and you're going to work out, or you're going to go for a run or a bike after work, have a match bar, eat half of it, eat 3/4, eat the whole thing, 45 minutes to an hour before you work out. We've got a couple slides here where we believe that the match idea and concept of delineated nutrition is personal, as we call it, will work out. One of them is granola, premium granola. We think that something like this, if we were put our mix into premium granola that sells for $4.99 to $6.99 for a poly bag of it, that's something that the consumer would react to. The other
Right.
thing is we have very.
I'm just going to remind everybody, we have a hard stop in 1 minute. This will
Okay.
this will automatically end.
Okay, so the other thing is,
If you have any questions, type them in now.
energy gels generally used for running and biking are also, it's a much smaller market, but we think that it would make sense. And we have very delineated ideas about how we can succeed in that marketplace too. And there's the brand expansion for granola.
Okay. Anybody want to say anything to Mark before we close up shop here?
It's really interesting, Mark. It's Jan, your neighbor.
Oh. Thanks, Jan.
really-
Thanks for
Really
coming on.
awesome. Really, I love being around entrepreneurs, and it was really fun to hear all this.
Thank you.
Beautiful bar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, gang. Well, I want to say thanks to Mickey for helping put this together and stitch it up. And thanks for attending.
Have a good one.
All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.